Hey everyone. I'd like to start off by apologizing for technical difficulties. We have, let's open the chat, about 60 people here, a lot of hellos. Is it now working? Oh, there's two of me in the room. One of them is left, thank God. You don't need two of you in any room. Um, we have about 60 people here. Where is everybody from? Let's, as I'm introducing Blair, I'd like to know where everybody's from. And so Blair can tell as well. Here with me, I have Blair. Blair is the head of the international strategy for Invest Ottawa. He manages quite a few teams, so I'm going to let him introduce himself because, as far as I can tell, Blair's responsibilities are always increasing. He's also, I see that a lot of people have been to Brazil. Blair has been to Brazil many times in his life. That's what he told me the first time we spoke. Um, and as you keep introducing yourself, some people from Pakistan, some people from Nigeria. That's pretty cool. Serbia as well. Wow. Hello, Goran. First time I've seen somebody from Serbia. But let's get started. Blair, if you'd like to introduce yourself, what do you do at Invest Ottawa? What is your team, the people you manage to, and what is Invest Ottawa's outlook on people from around the world?
Sure, and maybe I'll take a couple of minutes, Ash, and thank you for the introduction. That was kind. Just to frame this before I get into the presentation, don't let the presentation scare you. It's probably 60 slides, but I'm a recovering PowerPoint junkie, so I'll make it really quick. So I'm the Vice President of Global Expansion, and basically what that is looking after markets for foreign direct investment and trade. So attracting companies to the world like the Amazons of the world. We just landed those guys not too long ago, taking mature companies and startup and medium-sized companies to the world through our trade program. So I run two different teams that are connected together for investment and trade. And then I have a business retention expansion team that works on the ground here with local companies, figuring out what keeps them up at night and how we can help them. And it's everything. It's all kinds of business services and helping them connect to other companies around the world, partnerships, joint ventures, tried to, in some way connect them to venture capital in some cases or government funding and this sort of thing. And that's my group. So we're a modest team of 10 people. Our markets are Asia Pacific, which includes mainland China, of course, and in Hong Kong. And then all of Europe, which includes Nordic countries, and then sort of the east part of Europe, Eastern Europe, and of course, Western Europe. And then finally, the Americas, all the way down to Chile, Brazil, those great nations down there, and all the way up to the US, but heavy on the US, obviously, because we're connected to the United States of America. So interestingly enough, most organizations like ours only has this unit in it. First line, but in our case, we actually have two sides to our organization. Beyond my side, there's another vice president that runs something called venture development, and that's working with startups. And so on the first slide, it's basically the dovetailing of the global expansion unit, which is my unit, with the venture development, and it's to basically grow talent, right, and grow companies, whether they're coming in internationally, the slide before, coming in internationally, or they're coming in locally or growing locally. We work really closely to make sure that we have all the ecosystem in place to help grow these companies. So basically, it's high value jobs in our case. We're looking mainly at talent as it relates to engineers, because we are R&D and design technology hub. We have other sectors, but we're not manufacturers of auto and that sort of thing. So we really stick to the knowledge-based economy concept. Next slide. We've done really well over the years, and being the nation's capital, we rank in a number of categories here that you can see as one of the best places to live in the country and one of the most affordable places to live in the country, which I think is really important to people that are traveling abroad for work. and to live. It's not just about coming for the technology. It's actually about a lot of other things, quality of life, and some of the things that you see here, which we'll get into in a little while. So we have world-class number one in a lot of different areas. Next slide. The interesting thing about Ottawa as a tech hub is about 11% of the population works in technology. So what does that mean? When you have almost 80,000 people working in the ICT workforce, typically you have somebody that you know very close to you that's working in that industry. The next biggest employer to that is the federal government, which is because we're the seat of the nation's capital. There's over about 50,000 people in that industry. So the actual population of Ottawa is just under 1 million people. That's how we get the 11% of the workforce in ICT. The 1.3 million that you see there includes another city that's attached to us, which is in a different province. We're unique that way. We're provinces. We're based on provinces, not states. And as a province, we are butting up against the province of Quebec. And so the population, which is largely French-speaking population, sits just on the other side of a river from us and connected by 4 bridges. And so we make it a 1.3 population. And so a lot of the stats that you're going to see in here has to do with the National Capital Region versus just Ottawa. But we look at our economic footprint as the 2 cities together.
So would that be Ottawa and Gatineau?
Yeah, the city of Gatineau and the city of Ottawa.
Okay.
Of course, the tech hub truly does sit in Ottawa, but we have cross-pollination in companies and people traveling across the bridges every day in the hundreds of thousands. So it's quite significant. Next slide. So we were recognized. I'm not sure if anybody knows this. ICF is an Intelligent Community Forum. They have something called Smart Cities. And they have the top 20. Then you get down to the top 7. You get down to the top city in the world that's considered the most connected and innovative city. And essentially in 2010, 2016, 2017, we make the top 7 lists in all of those times. So, Ottawa's, going back to what we were saying, Ottawa's really looked at as the high-tech hub, and it's been internationally recognized several times. And in this community, there are a number of very good other cities that are doing wonderful things in technology. And the point I want to make about that is we're connected to all these other hubs around the world. And there's over 100 different cities around the world that are belonging to this ICF. And all of them are connected in some way. So it's not only the ecosystem here that we're playing in, it's an international ecosystem when we start building our tech hub. Next slide. And we're positioned pretty well in the North American area. So if you look at if you can see that, you'll see Ottawa on the right-hand side of your map in the pink area just above Toronto. And if you draw a circle in a 2-hour radius from a flight in any direction, you're hitting almost 200 million people. So the Northeast market in the US and Canada is very, very strong. But of course, as everybody knows, you have the Valley, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and other high-tech hubs that we can get to fairly easy within a day. And that is a pretty powerful market. And basically 90% of our goods and services currently go to the United States. Next slide's fine. Our sectors include health technology, software, communication technology, security, defense. We grew up in the communication technology industry primarily. Most people will remember Nortel. Nortel unfortunately failed a decade ago, and out of it came a number of tier 1 telecommunication companies that have set up shop here. But with the proliferation of telecom, 5G, next generation networks, a lot of disruptive technology started happening. A lot of other spin-off technologies in e-commerce, health-related science, autonomous vehicle, precision agriculture, all these kind of things started to pop up. Next slide. And so what you have now is a pretty good cross-pollination of the telecom industry into autonomous vehicle, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, data analytics, and the rest of them are there that you can see. So Ottawa is playing very, very, very deep on the ICT level right now, and looking at really innovative ways to come up with things that are in the sphere of AI, Internet of Things, all that kind of stuff. So we're pretty world class in a lot of these areas, and we're really rising above everybody else in these different sectors. Next slide. And so, for example, you'll see on the top left-hand corner the first autonomous vehicle that we've had on public roadways driving over a year ago. We were ahead of a lot of other people where it was a completely autonomous vehicle driving. On the cyber front, we're currently developing a digital project to identify our collective cyber security capabilities and expertise. Bottom left corner is a company that came out of our incubator accelerator. So we talked about the startups called FarmLead. They created a virtual marketplace for grain. And then, of course, everybody has hospitals, but we've recently hosted a digital health innovation roundtable with all the hospitals. And we're about to build a multi-billion-dollar new hospital with all the kinds of interesting technology that you saw on the previous page with emerging technologies. Next slide. So tech intensity of Canada's cities, we've talked about this. It's actually a little bit higher than the 8%. That the 8% is based on a little bit older data, but it's actually about 11% in terms of the population that works here in the high-tech industry. Next slide. Again, we talked about the telecommunications industry, and 90% of Canada's industrial telecommunications and R&D happens here in Ottawa, and largely because of all the tier ones that came in and took over for Nortel. So you're anchored in networking firms like Cisco, Nokia, Shenzhen, Fujitsu, Huawei, ZTE. A lot of these world-class companies and trailblazers are here. Next slide. And then, interestingly enough, you're getting into something that's a little bit is spinning out of the same sort of concept of telecom, and you're getting into e-commerce. And Shopify happens to be a homegrown company here, started off with a handful of people, and of course, as we know, they're a multi-billion-dollar company now. They're doing very, very well and growing a lot in our area, in our region, and attracting a lot of other companies into the region as well. So now we're starting to see an interesting proliferation of millennials coming in and working in the downtown core of where we are, and really building up these types of companies in and around the Shopify. And then the traditional telecom, which happens to sit 20 minutes outside of our city in what we would call the research park, the high-tech research park. And the older traditional telecom stuff is going on there. We have actually two really great anchor tenants, one just outside in our suburbs in the high-tech park, and then one with new millennials and great companies like Shopify growing in our downtown core, which is completely revitalizing everything that's going on in our core area. We have the highest percentage of R&D expenditures for science and technology, meaning most of the money that's being put into R&D from our federal government and comes into our backyard. And it's largely based on the fact that the majority of the federal labs that work on high technology, that have PhDs and masters kind of talent, sit right in Ottawa. So we're placed fairly high in the world on quantum computing, for example. And our National Research Council, which has a lot of these labs, sit right in our backyard. Next slide. And then this moves into talent, really, and how great our talent is. Next slide. Actually, next slide after that. And so we have the fastest growing tech talent momentum in basically North America. So if you look at this slide, we're number one. And even if you look at places like Los Angeles, number two, which you would think in the west of North America it would grow faster. It's actually Ottawa, and a lot of it has to do with what's going to be coming up on quality of life and some of the other things I'm going to be talking about. Next slide. But with all this great stuff that's going on in Ottawa, we have some talent shortages, and we need to fill those spaces. So according to the IT labor market report, which just came out recently, Canada needs about 180,000 people to fill positions in 2019. And so ICT is expected to be over 9,700 in terms of hiring requirements in Ottawa, which is quite amount of people. If you're thinking that we're having just almost 80,000 people, we need another 10,000. So there's lots of room for growth here if you're looking for work with a special knowledge-based economy type of a background. And currently there's over 3,000 jobs that need to be filled right now. On new support, Ottawa companies identified a lack of availability for senior talent. So through our business retention expansion, conversations with our companies, basically the companies are saying that they need people with 10, 15, and even more experience rather than just the post-secondary institutions, college and university students coming out. Because they're working on such deep technology, they need that kind of experience. So they're open to having conversations with great talent from around the world. Next slide. And then you get into the life you want. Next slide. And this is all about cost of living and quality of life. So you can see these are all North American cities, 1 to 9. San Francisco being 9, obviously, and Ottawa is ranked at the top. And it's basically a Mercer report that reveals sort of the cost of living in major cities and how they're ranked. So we are the least expensive Canadian city. And in North America, one of the least expensive cities in North America. We have a best place to live. Next slide. Yep, best place to live. With our population, like I was saying, just around 1 million. I think that Canada's been ranked in the top 10, which is very good ranking. If you're talking about some of the great quality of life that happens other places like Europe. Next slide. And Ottawa's #1 for attractiveness and economic destination. So it has the highest median of employment income per family. So basically, it just means that with a family of 2 people, for example, making a salary, you're well above the average in terms of what an average city would cost, or what an average wage would be for 2 people in a household in a city. And so the quality of life therefore becomes pretty high because to income at that high level, and a lot of people are working in high tech together, or they're working in government, 2 very high paying jobs that would yield obviously a better quality of life. Next slide. And then the average rental cost for Ottawa, you can see for a bachelor is not even a 1-bedroom. It's just a big open room. 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom, it's pretty modest. These are Canadian dollars, by the way. And so if you look at how much it would cost, for example, on a 3-bedroom in the United States, that would jump almost 50% more, almost. So it would be pretty expensive based on the American dollar. Single family home, we still have a pretty modest single family home rate. $424,000 for an average home. A townhome is $250,000. An apartment is a little bit more. Condos are a little bit more expensive. They're parked in the downtown area. They're urban. They're close to everything, so it tends to be a little bit more. But you can get a good sized family home for under $500,000 Canadian. Next. And then projected home ownership cost. Basically, you're looking at using about 40% of your income to live in your house, versus Vancouver, which would be 88%, or Toronto, which would be about a 79% spend on that. So you can see the cost savings there. Next slide.
Sorry, I live in Vancouver right now. So
quality of life is great in Ottawa. You can go to the next slide. We have great schools. We have high-speed internet. We have all kinds of great internet connectivity. We have great pubs and festivals that you can go to in our downtown core. Next slide. You notice we have no snow in any of these pictures because it does not snow in our country. Playground. We have parks and recreation and biking and all kinds of great things that you can go do.
Actually, the downtown Ottawa is one of the most walkable parts of the country. It's really walkable downtown area. Easy to get past to all the places. Is pretty, like, I love walking around Ottawa when I'm in town.
Yeah, and so vibrant community festivals, all kinds of museums, great things that go on. No different than any other big national city, but healthcare is great. As a citizen of our country, as most people know, we have probably one of the best healthcare systems in the world, which means if something really terrible, unfortunately, happens, you can walk in without getting a really massive bill. But of course, you pay through taxes for it. But it is universal healthcare, which is great. Next slide. Well, there's our only slide with the winters. So a few slides ago, you saw a body of water that was open with boats on it. This is the same body of water taken from a different vantage point with people skating on it. World UNESCO Heritage Site, world's largest skating rink in the world. This is right in the downtown core, and it's our Rideau Canal. Next slide. And of course, we have all kinds of great education and renowned architecture and teams in designing. And we have our public libraries and Archives Canada, all these kind of great things that are here. So not very different from what you'd see in Washington, D.C. if you've been to Washington, D.C. And of course, it's Canada is known for being very safe, and Canada is one of the safest cities nationwide. So we're pretty proud of that as well. And of course, we have an award-winning transit system that we just put in. Our light rail will be carrying people in the very near future. It was just put in $2.1 billion, and it connects all the post-secondary institutions and basically the downtown core. So that's very good for us. First time we have a light rail. Next one. And finally, we're blessed with a huge land area. So basically, 30% of Ottawa's commuters use public transit, and we're a sprawling city with a lot of suburbs, but with an excellent transit system to get everybody around. So and we're very green. I would say it's about 8 to 12% urbanized, and the rest is rural. And so there you go. There's a very, very quick caption of what we have to offer in Ottawa. Take questions.
Thanks, Blair. That was really quick. We will be sending out the presentation as well at the end. Yeah, you know, I'm sure people have lots of questions about Ottawa. I think there was a gentleman here who's saying that, you know, it seems like you're trying to convince me to come live there. I'm totally sold on the idea. I'm the one who should be convincing somebody to hire me. So let's start off with, I have a couple questions, but if you have any questions, the 61 people that are still with us, please post your questions, and you know, we'll get Blair to answer some of them right there. So the chat is open. So yeah.
Are you going to read them to me? Because I don't see them on mine here.
Of course. Nobody has said anything yet.
Okay, cool.
And now they're starting to come in. Okay, can you talk a little bit about the job market for digital marketing positions? Is that kind of a job which there are quite a few of those positions in Ottawa?
Yeah, so I'm going to put it under the umbrella of creative industries because that's sort of where it would fit, right? And so the interesting thing about that is we have a number of companies that are in that space. It's not as large as our telecommunications and software and AI and nanotechnology and that sort of traditional piece of our business, but it definitely is a place that people are looking at in terms of creative industry, and it cross-pollinates with all kinds, you know, not just digital media, but it cross-pollinates with all kinds of interesting things that are going on there. As a complete aside, we're actually building a studio for creative industries to get all these different sectors and subsectors together under one house right now. And so that's going to be built in the next year, and it's going to be housed within our city limits, which will attract even more folks that you're talking about right now. But I do want to go back to another thing that was said by a gentleman. He was saying, it sounds like I'm trying to convince you to come. I am. I'm trying to convince people to come. Why? And you know, everybody thinks they have a great quality of life, right? I mean, we do have snow. I jokingly said we don't. We obviously have snow. But, you know, if you're in Houston, Texas, and you can fry an egg on the front of your vehicle in the middle of summer, they think that's a great quality of life, too. So it really is what you're used to and what you really want to go do. And what I will say, because most of the people that come get the technology piece of this. But when they come into Ottawa, what they really appreciate is that, it is 4 seasons. It does have an amazing quality of life, and it's actually affordable in North America terms, which isn't the case necessarily with our neighbors to the south of us in the U.S., and it definitely isn't the same as some of the high-tech hubs around Canada, where it's saturated with a lot of talent, but it's not as affordable. So when you put a mix in of, so I'll say it back to the 64 people that are on the air right now. If you have a great resume that is high-tech related and all that knowledge-based economy stuff that I've just talked about, and you have 10 years experience, 15 years experience, we do want to hear from you, because there is a good possibility that we can at least show you to some of the companies that are looking for talent. We can't guarantee anybody can get a job, but at least we can be that funnel that you go through to go and do that. The other thing I'll say for Canada, Ash, is most of the 13 cities across Canada, the big cities from Vancouver, from east to west, including Ottawa, we've all signed a memo of understanding with the federal government on something called the Global Talent Initiative, Global Skills Talent Initiative. And what basically that means is, if we find the right people for jobs, we're a vehicle to come through and vet for the federal government to fast track high-tech people through a program that could take up to weeks instead of months or a year to get into Canada. And that's something that if, we have people on my staff, that could walk whoever your audience is through if they qualify. So the trick for me is to find out who these people are. And of course, Ash, I'll leave that to you, you should be the vehicle to come back to us so that we can start looking at their skills. But there's definitely a need for high-tech people to come into our community.
For sure. And there's many different roles, especially if you're a non-technical person as well. Invest Ottawa is a partner with the Canadian government, and they help you as well. So let's say if you're a marketer who has specialty and experience in working telecommunications sector or defense and so on, then Invest Ottawa is definitely a great organization for that. We work with a few companies in the Ottawa area and across the country, and of course, apply for jobs, and we try to send the best candidates over to our clients. And the question here is, does Ottawa Planning and Immigration Assistance Program? I think Blair just addressed that. Ontario itself doesn't have a provincial nominee program of a sort, or they may, but the Global Talent Stream is by far the most effective program, and it comes straight from the federal government, and it's across the country. And as Blair mentioned, they specialize in that. One of the questions is, what are the what are the average temperatures in Ottawa? I think I can answer this question. So I live in Vancouver.
Do you want it Celsius or Fahrenheit?
Celsius. I think.
It's plus 26 every day. We have palm trees everywhere. No, I mean, look, I'll be completely frank. And our friends that are in Europe, in further north, will get this. In the middle of summer, I have a country home, and I'm on my boat, and it gets up to 30 degrees often, 25, 30. For most of the summer. So summer for us really is, sort of late June, July, August, and early September. And in fact, with global warming, to be honest with you, our summers are getting longer. So you can expect decent weather from all the way out from April, where you're getting into weather that's more like 10 above. May, you start getting up into 12, 13, 15. And then in the summer, in the middle of summer, it's really high, and then it goes down. In the middle of winter, I'm not going to lie. Today, it's minus 20. But those cold snaps are shorter, and you have a lot more sun in Ottawa, just its proximity to where we are on the 49th parallel. And you get more snow, but the recreational activity around here is very, very high. So skating.
But the good thing is it's good snow too, because it's Ottawa is a much drier city than say Toronto. Right. In Toronto, when it snows, the snow's a bit wetter. In Ottawa, it's quite dry, and it forms a nice level field, and they get a lot more sunshine in Ottawa than you do in most other cities as well.
Yeah. So the deal there is we get a cumulative snow versus Toronto snow melt, because it's 5 hours south of us driving. So you get some extremes, but most of the people that come here, even if they've been through to warmer climates, embrace it and they go out and enjoy it anyway. So
okay, there's a few more questions. I'm going to answer some of them as well. What is the average salary for a software developer with 3 years of experience in Ottawa? I would say anywhere between 75 to 90. If you're a senior developer, if you're a senior developer with over 5 to 10 years experience, especially in some of those more, engineering focused fields that he covered, which Ottawa is famous for, such as research, R&D, etc., the salaries would be quite higher, but also you'd need that 10 years of experience, and maybe a master's or a PhD if you want to get into research. We covered the assistance program, what kind of visa, the Global Talent Stream visa, which is you get a work permit through it. Here's a good question. Is Ottawa, so most of Canada is receptive to foreigners, but what is the makeup of internationals that live in Ottawa? Is it common for people to be from other countries, and specifically Brazil as well? And this is my question: is where in Brazil have you been?
Okay, so let me take the first one. We're very, very, very diverse. We have all walks of life here, from all over the world. So there is no question in my mind, depending on where you come from, you're going to find people of your similar culture. We have over 100 different languages spoken in the region. So you'd feel right at home here. And keep in mind, Canada is a mosaic versus a melting pot, right? So instead of assimilating, we embrace all different cultures. Which I think is unique for us in Canada. So that's one thing. So there's no issue. There's probably somebody of your background here in Canada. And Ottawa's just like that because it's the nation's capital. It attracts all kinds of people. So where have I been? I've been to Sao Paulo. I've been to Campinas. I've been to Belo Horizonte. I've been to Florianopolis. I've been to Fortaleza. I've been to Rio de Janeiro, and I've been to, I already said Campinas. I'm running out. I've been to places. I have not been to Brasilia, although I'd love to go, but most of the stuff that I was doing were high-tech hubs in all the areas I just said. And most of the time when I went down, I was in Sao Paulo. And just so you know, for those folks for Brazil, we have had some immigrants come and set up and do work here, and we've already been through that, so it's going pretty well. I would say the one thing about Brazil is they have amazing young talent that are coming up, and we're keeping an eye on a lot of that great talent
and older talent as well. There's a gentleman here with 20 years of experience, and I know him really well, and he has a question which he asks every company and every time I talk to him.
Yeah.
How easy is it to find a place to rent that accepts pets, cats and dogs?
Oh yeah, no, that's
2 cats and 2 dogs. So
yeah, it's a very pet friendly society up here. They're like family.
I think that which is really good to say in a city like Toronto and Vancouver, where people are living, and Montreal as well, I'm guessing, where they're living in condos and more, this kind of dense housing. It's tougher to find a place, but Ottawa has a lot more houses and yards and so on, and so having pets is a very common thing. So it should be easier in Ottawa versus, say, one of the bigger metropolises.
Not only that, but they have a ton of dog parks around, specifically for them to run around and hang out in. So if that person, I'll hook them up.
Yeah, Chris is a really good friend of mine, and he actually used to work with us, so I know that that's really important to him.
Yeah, yeah. No, you're
This
good.
is the year he's going to make a move. Um, Another question I have here is, and we're almost, we have 10 more minutes, so that's good. This is an interesting question.
Mhm.
It's from Ramiro, and his question is, uh, you know, if a person is living in Gatineau but
Mm.
working in Ottawa, um, is there uh, how does the taxes work there? Like, because there's provincial tax. I'm guessing in Quebec, and there's provincial tax in Ontario as well, right? Are
Well,
you aware of that situation?
so you're not paying a provincial tax, you're paying a federal tax,
Hmm.
which is your personal tax. So that's pretty straightforward. Um, what you pay is property taxes at a municipal level. So if you're working in Ottawa, you're not paying property taxes. You're paying them in Quebec, and vice versa. So that's not an issue. And going back and forth over the border isn't an issue. It's just when you're paying your taxes in Quebec, if you're living in Quebec, you're paying your taxes in Quebec. It's as simple as that.
So do
Um,
employers have your address, and they? I think that when they do your income tax, you know, contributions.
but you get a T4 like anywhere else.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So that's never been an issue here. Like you work and you live in different places in Ottawa and Gatineau all the time. It's all the time.
Okay.
There's not an issue, and we can walk through that. It's a little bit more complicated, but it's not a big issue. Where it becomes a bit of there's a difference on the healthcare, which is really where you see it. So that's a provincial thing, right? So I can go over to any province, or I can go over to Quebec and get healthcare there, but then there's a cost back to Ontario. But because we're a confederation and we're all under one umbrella, you're allowed to go cross province. But that's where it just becomes a little bit uh, different. But it's not that complicated at all. I have, in fact, funnily enough, I have my house in Ottawa where I live during the week, and when I'm not traveling around the world, I'm in my lake, which is in Quebec, which is a 45-minute drive just on the other side of the bridge. And so if I've been hurt there where I've had to go to the hospital for stitches and I haven't seen a bill, there's a crossing over on provincial that they do that you don't really see. So anyway.
Okay, that's good to know, and it's just expanding on that point. Uh, uh, would it be important to speak French or learn French if they were living in Ottawa?
Well, if you're going to go work for the federal government, yep, you should be fluently bilingual is generally the rule of thumb. And they have a test that you would take to tell you if you were there. If you're in the high tech industry, it's not a requirement in high tech that I've ever seen where you need to speak French. There are a lot of French people that are bilingual people, or French people, excuse me, that work in high tech and speak French, but it's not a requirement from my perspective and what I've seen, because it's largely an English-driven sort of sector, right? Technology,
Yep,
ICT.
for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
How about we switch it up? Let's say that do you have any questions for the audience? You know, like I'll just read out what they say.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
You want me to ask questions to your audience?
Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
Um, I would like to know, because you have such a diverse international audience, I'd like to know what they think of us, like as a whole in Canada, like looking over here in North America, what are their thoughts on us? And it could be anything. Do they see us as a high tech powerhouse that I think we are? Do they see us as what we think we are, which are really friendly people that people would love to do business with? I mean, I'm kind of curious that you've got this background on the phone. What do they think of me? Not me, but the country and our city in general.
For sure. I wish we could. I don't know if I can turn on and get people to speak, but I can read out what they're saying.
Sure. Yeah.
For sure. So Pedro, who was trying to convince you that he should be convincing you and not you convincing him, thinks Canada is awesome. Danilo thinks
Sorry,
Canada.
and can you tell me where these people are from?
Yeah, sure. I think please put your country that you're from right next to it when you answer the question. Um, Danilo, who I think is Brazilian for sure, is says Canada is the future. Augusto, which is also probably Brazilian. If I will be able to get a job. Oh, he's asking a question. If you get a job as a developer, how difficult is wife to get a job in business administration? So if you get a job as a developer, you get you get a closed work permit tied to the employer. Your spouse will get an open work permit, and your children will get study permits from the Global Talent Stream. So she should be able to get a job if she qualifies and gets a job. She'd be allowed to. So Pedro says he loves the Canada arm on the International Space Station.
You know what? That was partly developed right here in our backyard.
Yeah. A majority of the people here are from Brazil. There's a gentleman from Pakistan. There's one person says when he thinks of Canada, he thinks of snow. Ramiro, my good friend, is from Colombia. Good to see him again. There's a network engineer from Nigeria who says it's awesome for tech talent. There's a gentleman from Mexico who's living in Toronto who wants to get out of there because it's expensive and Ottawa sounds very interesting. Aurea, who's from Brazil, says very receptive society, special places, quite open to differences. Gentleman from Nigeria says has an amazing culture. Another gentleman says great to raise children, and another one says it's like a dream.
You know what? All these people can speak for me because I put this in my deck all the time. I travel the world and I tell everybody this exact thing. And it's just great to hear people saying that about us. Having said that, I think if you look at where we were in technology and where we're going, I think we're on cutting edge in some areas. And I think in order for us to hold our place and even move ahead, we need other thinkers other than just Canadians. We need some of the hardest working people are the immigrants who have come into our country over the years, but even back to the Industrial Revolution days, right, when it started with Europe, and to today. And we need that kind of diversity, and we need other type of thinkers to actually move the yardsticks further than what we have right now. So I think we're coming down to the wire, but my parting note to everybody is, you know what, Canada's open for business. I think I've said this to you before, Ash, but I wear two hats. I'm the vice president here running the city level stuff for foreign direct investment and trade, but I also wear the hat as the president for the Consider Canada City Alliance, which is the top 13 cities across Canada that do foreign direct investment. And although I'm just a spokesperson and the front window dressing to try and convince companies to come in and to be an advocate for the cities here at Parliament Hill in our community. And we all are in the same boat in terms of talent, and we all need the same thing. So you can rinse and repeat this message from Vancouver to Halifax. It's the same narrative with different sectors. So I would encourage anybody that has experience, great qualifications, great references, because it's going to help, to go through Ash to come in. Our commitment is to work with Ash on whoever's coming in to try and see if we can hook you up.
For sure. And thanks a lot, Blair. And it's true is, Canada is, it's growing really fast and it's a great society. And, the thing that we've seen across the country is no matter where people go, people are really welcoming. And the one thing I want to say about Ottawa specifically, I've met Blair. I've never met Blair in person. I've met many members of his team. And, Ottawa has always been a very welcoming city. When I visited, the people are very friendly, and they it is the one city in the country where I've seen more global businesses, especially in their research park. Just the names you drive by and you go, whoa, that company's here, that company's here. And like it's pretty remarkable. And especially if you're a very highly skilled engineer and somebody who's serious about, getting into the computer hardware engineering, software engineering piece, Ottawa is a great place. So if you've been looking for roles like that, definitely get in touch and also check out other companies in Ottawa. I know there are many of them that we don't work with as well, which also sponsor visas and are looking for candidates. So definitely take a look as well. But I want to finish off with thank you, Blair. I will, you can find Blair on LinkedIn. It's Blair Patak. I don't know how to say your last name, Blair. Patak. I'm just going to post it in here. Give him an ad. Next time he's in Brazil, maybe someone can invite him for dinner. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. And thanks, Blair. And thanks, Pat. There's a gentleman on the other side who made this happen as well. Thank you, Pat. And thank you, Deza, who's also not here. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. And hope to see you one day. Bye for now.
Okay.
Thanks,
everyone.